Hi, I'm Dylan,
And I'm Catherine.
and our project is a redesign of the route setting process at the pad climbing. In this presentation, we will go through the background, the problem statement, the current state, the design approach, the recommendations for improvement, design alternatives not tested, the testing of improved state, economic analysis, and secondary impacts of our project.
The Pad Climbing is a rock climbing gym and yoga studio in San Luis Obispo. Formerly named Slow Up Climbing, the company has been in Slow since 2002, but changed names when their new facility opened this past December. The new facility features top rope and lead climbing in addition to bouldering. In the gym, different routes are marked with colored hand and footholds, each color corresponding to a different route. The challenge for a climber is to figure out how to get to the top of the wall using only the color corresponding to the route they are climbing. Once they've solved a route, it is no longer a challenge. To keep regular climbers interested, employees change some of the routes a few times a week. The process of taking down old routes and putting up new ones is called setting.
The problem is the process of setting new climbing routes is time-consuming and has long changeover times. This results in a lower available capacity, which leads to a loss of potential customers and decreased customer satisfaction. After collecting direct time study data, we determined the fixed time was 30 minutes. This is the time to bring out the ladder, holds, and other necessary equipment, and only needs to be done once regardless of how many routes you're setting. The variable time changes as the number of holds changes. It includes setting new holds and taking down and power washing old holds. The variable time was 6.86 minutes per hold, so for an average of 35 holds per route, the average total time for one route was 4.5 hours. The setter sets up the ladder and ropes off the area around it to keep customers a safe distance away. They then use the drill to unbolt the old holds and drop them on the ground. They use the ladder to reach as many of the holes as they can before switching to a rope and harness to reach the higher ones. They then proceed to finish unbolting the route. After the old holds are removed, they are placed in the bucket and are taken outside to be power washed, which cleans the holds and removes any chalk on them. The next step is to select new holds and bolts for the new route. The setter places the new holds from the bottom up on the wall, starting with the ladder before switching to a rope and harness to reach the higher holds. Once the route is finished, the setter climbs the route and makes any necessary adjustments. After, another setter climbs the route and makes their recommendations for it. Once both setters agree, the equipment is put away and the process is complete.
The design approach we used was DMAIC, or define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. In the define stage, we determined our problem statement and set the scope for a project. We also created a schedule for when we would complete all the necessary tasks for a project. Then we did a Gemba walk, and the head route setter explained all the steps of the process test. Then we did time and motion studies on the process and recorded videos of the entire process start to finish. We also conducted surveys to study customer satisfaction and determine how often customers would like routes to be set. To analyze this data, we created a process flow diagram to map out the process and identify waste. Then we created a Pareto chart to determine what areas of improvement to focus on. To improve the process, we did a process redesign by applying lean principles and making it as efficient as possible. We then implemented our solution and completed another time study to evaluate time and cost savings. We came up with recommendations for improvements in efficiency, safety, and customer satisfaction. These are the changes we recommended to improve the efficiency of the setting process. The first was to tie the top rope to a fixed object instead of using a separate rope. This eliminates the 10 minutes required to climb to the top of the wall and anchor another rope to the top of the wall. Just securing one end of the existing top rope should work the same way. Our next recommendation was to use a bucket when taking down the old route rather than dropping them on the floor. This will reduce the safety risk of holds falling, decrease the probability of holds breaking or damaging the floor, and eliminate the time it takes for them to pick up the fallen holds and bolts. We also recommended that they invest in a second power washer. We estimate that this will cut the power washing time in half because the two setters will not have to take turns washing holds. We also recommended that they power wash the holds after they're completely done setting rather than right after they take down the old holds. This way, they can use that time to complete the new route before the gym is open for customers, and do the power washing outside of the gym after the gym opens. Another improvement is to store the equipment behind the walls in the rope area rather than the storage closet on the other side of the gym. There is space available there, and this will save them time in setting up and putting away the equipment. We also found that the setters often will forget things like the drill or bolts and will have to go back down to get them. To prevent these errors, we recommended making a checklist of items needed for setting so they can double check that they have everything before they go up on the wall to set. After the route is set, we recommended adjusting the route as they test it instead of testing the whole thing and then making adjustments. This will save time and reduce going up and down the wall multiple times.
Now we will talk about our changes involving safety and customer satisfaction. For safety, our first recommendation is to require setters to clip in on the ropes while they're on the ladder at heights greater than 15 feet. Our second is to not allow setters to set alone, as injuries can go unreported if no one else is in the gym. Our third recommendation is to use large holds towards the bottom of the routes. Since they're heavier, they can cause more damage if they fall from a higher up place on the wall. Our fourth recommendation is to replace cracked or broken holds as quickly as possible so that they do not injure setters or climbers. Lastly, don't set when customers are present to avoid injuries to customers. For our customer satisfaction changes, we recommend having a route setting board to allow members to comment on routes and allow setters to comment back. This creates a fun atmosphere where setters can get feedback on the routes they're setting and the climbers can give input on the routes. The next is to have a consistent route setting schedule so that climbers can know in advance when new routes will be up so they can plan accordingly. Next is that when you're unsure of what grade a route is, grade it higher rather than lower. This reduces frustration from customers and builds confidence. Lastly, place names on the routes in addition to just the grade. This creates a sense of fun and community, and it makes it easier to refer to the routes when discussing them.
There were a couple other design alternatives that we came up with but decided not to test. One was to have 2 setters per route so that they could work together and complete the route faster. We thought this might be problematic because the setters take ownership of their routes and they like to have creative say over them. This will also require more employees setting, which would increase cost. Another idea we considered was to have setters plan routes ahead of time using software. We decided against this idea for our project because it would require expensive software and there would need to be a map of the entire gym's walls and features. Also, it would be difficult for the setters to visualize climbing moves because body position is not as intuitive on paper as it is in person. Most setters rely on testing the moves in person to decide where to put holds.
Upon implementing our improvements, we redid time studies for the new route setting process. Assuming there are 35 holds per route on average, the improved fixed time is 10 minutes, and the improved variable time is 5.43 minutes per hold, which is about 190 minutes per route. And the improved total time for setting one route is 3.3 hours. This is 1.2 hours less than the original lead time of 4.5 hours and is a 27% improvement.
We conducted a survey of customers at the pad by selecting 50 random climbers. These were the results of the survey. 94% liked the idea of naming routes. 84% thought they would use a feedback board, and another 14% said they wouldn't but thought that others might. 100% of customers surveyed liked the idea of being able to see a predetermined route setting schedule with the dates and locations of where the next set will be. 96% said it bothers them more when a route is harder than the listed grade than when it's easier than the listed grade. 88% wish that the pad would set new routes more often.
To estimate the cost of our design, we assumed a new power washer would cost about $200. Each setter makes $20 an hour, so if the setting time is reduced by 1.2 hours per route, then that would save the pad $24 per route. If 240 routes are set in a year, then the pad will save $5,760 a year.
These are the secondary impacts that we believe will result from our design. Fewer employees or fewer hours from each employee will be needed to set the same amount of routes. If they don't increase the amount of routes they set, this could result in a loss of jobs. There will also be an expectation to set routes within the 3 hours before the gym opens. Currently, the setters do not feel time pressured because there's an understanding that the process takes a long time and will continue even when customers are present. If the gym owners set the expectation that setting will not happen when customers are present, there will be a lot more pressure on the employees, and this will change the culture of the company. Another impact is if they increase how often they set the routes, this will mean more holds needing to be power washed. This will require more water and energy. Lastly, the effects of increased capacity and improved customer service will result in parking being even more limited. They are already beginning to have issues with parking availability, and customers have begun parking in neighboring businesses' parking lots, resulting in many complaints from these businesses.